A deal with honor. Valeria Marchesi thought she had escaped her family's sins. But when her brother disappeared, leaving behind a debt no one could pay, she learned the truth. His price was now hers. Niccolò Moretti leaned in, his golden eyes glinting. "Your brother ran from me," he murmured. "Let's see if you're braver." Chapter 1. The Reluctant Return. The wrought iron gates of the Villa Marchesi loomed before Valeria, a stark, beautiful cage she had sworn never to return to. 20 years. 20 years of building a life, a normal life, in the quiet anonymity of a small Tuscan village, far from the opulent, suffocating world of her family. The villa, perched on a hill overlooking Florence, was a masterpiece of Renaissance architecture, its ochre walls glowing warmly in the late afternoon sun. But to Valeria, it represented a prison, a gilded one, but a prison nonetheless. She ran a hand through her silver-streaked, dark hair, a nervous habit she hadn't quite managed to shake. Her simple linen dress, a far cry from the designer clothes she'd once worn, felt almost defiant against the backdrop of such grandeur. The air, thick with the scent of jasmine and something else, something indefinably Marchesi, a blend of old money, power, and a hint of something darker, made her stomach clench. The summons had been abrupt, cryptic, and delivered with a chilling formality that had sent a shiver of dread down her spine. La Signora Marchesi is required at the villa. Immediate attendance is mandatory. No signature, just the Marchesi crest, a coiled serpent biting its own tail, embossed on the heavy cream paper. A symbol of endless cycles, of inescapable destiny. She'd almost ignored it. Almost convinced herself that it was a mistake, a cruel joke played by a past she desperately tried to bury. But the knot in her stomach, the cold certainty that had settled in her bones, told her otherwise. Something was terribly wrong. Her brother, Leo. The thought of him, reckless, charming, perpetually in trouble Leo, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. As she approached the massive oak doors, they swung inward silently, revealing a liveried servant, his face impassive, his eyes holding a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher, pity, perhaps, or warning. He bowed slightly.
"Signora Marchesi."
"They are waiting for you in the library." The library, the heart of the villa, where generations of Marchesi had made decisions that had shaped not only their family's fortunes, but the very fabric of the city's underworld. Valeria had spent countless hours there as a child, curled up in a leather armchair, lost in the pages of ancient books, while her father, the formidable Don Alessandro Marchesi, held court with men whose smiles never quite reached their eyes. The scent of old leather and pipe tobacco hit her as she entered, a wave of nostalgia mixed with a profound sense of unease. The room was exactly as she remembered it, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a massive mahogany desk dominating the center, and a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. The fire, despite the warmth of the day, was blazing merrily, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Standing with his back to her, gazing out the window at the sprawling gardens below, was a figure she didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that filled the room, even though he hadn't yet uttered a word. He turned slowly, and Valeria felt her breath catch in her throat. He was strikingly handsome, in a way that was both captivating and dangerous. His eyes, a startling shade of gold, held a glint of something hard, something untamed. His dark hair was swept back from a strong, angular face, and a faint scar traced a line across his jaw, adding to his aura of rugged masculinity. He was dressed impeccably in a dark suit that seemed to mold to his powerful physique. "Valeria Marchesi," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a claiming. "You've kept yourself hidden for a long time." She straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "I prefer a quiet life."
"Who are you?
"And where is my brother?" A flicker of amusement crossed his lips. Such directness. "I admire that."
"I am Niccolò Moretti."
The name hit her like a physical blow. Moretti. The rivals. The family that had been locked in a bitter, bloody feud with the Marchesi for generations. A feud that had supposedly ended with a fragile truce years ago. A truce that her father had brokered, at a great cost. "What are you doing here?" Her voice trembled slightly, despite her best efforts to control it. He took a step closer, his golden eyes holding hers captive. "Your brother, Leo, has disappeared. He left behind a considerable debt. A debt to me." Valeria felt a wave of nausea wash over her.
Leo.
Always in trouble, always relying on his charm and his family name to get him out of it. But this was different. This was dangerous. "What kind of debt?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Niccolò Moretti smiled, a slow, predatory smile that sent a chill down her spine. "The kind that cannot be repaid with money, Signora Marchesi. The kind that requires a different sort of currency." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "Your brother offered something he could not deliver. He ran. Now his debt is yours." The fire crackled, filling the silence. Valeria's heart pounded, mirroring the flame's erratic dance, the Moretti crest on his signet ring glinting menacingly. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. Valeria stared at Niccolò Moretti, trying to decipher the meaning behind his cryptic words. "A different sort of currency," he'd said. The phrase echoed in the opulent library, heavy with the scent of old leather and impending doom. The shadows cast by the flickering fire seemed to dance with a malevolent energy, mirroring the turmoil within her. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice firmer now, fueled by a surge of defiance. "Leo may be reckless, but he wouldn't offer something he couldn't give. He wouldn't just disappear." Niccolò Moretti raised a dark eyebrow, a flicker of something that might have been admiration in his golden eyes. "Wouldn't he? Your brother, Signora Marchesi, has a talent for making promises he can't keep. He borrowed a significant sum, not just money but favors. Favors that involved certain delicate information." Valeria's mind raced. Leo had always been involved in the family's business, but she had deliberately kept herself apart, choosing a life of quiet obscurity, teaching art history at a small school in her adopted village. She had wanted nothing to do with the shadowy dealings, the whispered threats, the constant undercurrent of violence that permeated her family's world. Information? About what? He moved closer, his presence overwhelming, his scent a mix of expensive cologne and something subtly wilder filling her senses. About certain alliances. About weaknesses in certain families. Information that could be very valuable to the right people. The Moretti family. Of course. The ancient rivalry, the constant jockeying for power, the delicate balance of terror that had kept the peace between them for so long. Leo, in his foolishness, had apparently tried to play both sides, to profit from the animosity that had defined their families for generations. "And you think I know something about this?" Valeria asked, her voice laced with incredulity. "I haven't been involved in the family business for 20 years. I know nothing." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense, unnerving. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you know more than you let on. You were always your father's favorite, Signora Marchesi. He confided in you. He trusted you." A wave of grief washed over her. Her father, Don Alessandro, had been a complex man, a ruthless leader, but also a loving father, in his own way. He had tried to shield her from the darker aspects of their world, but he had also shared his burdens, his fears, his hopes for a future where the Marchesi family could finally escape the cycle of violence. "My father is dead," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He died 5 years ago. Whatever secrets he had, they died with him." Niccolò Moretti's expression didn't change. "Some secrets have a way of lingering, Signora Marchesi. Like shadows. They cling to the walls, they whisper in the dark. And sometimes they are passed down from one generation to the next." He reached out and gently touched a strand of her hair, his fingers lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Valeria felt a jolt of something unexpected, a strange mix of fear and something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. A spark of attraction, dangerous and forbidden. Your brother believed you held the key to settling his debt. Nicolo continued, his voice a low murmur, his breath warm on her cheek. He believed you knew where to find something that would satisfy me. Something that would make me forget his indiscretions. Valeria pulled back, breaking the contact. I don't know what he's talking about. I have nothing of value to you. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. We shall see, Signora Marchesi.
We shall see.
You have 1 week. 1 week to find what your brother promised me. Or he paused, letting the unspoken threat hang in the air. Or the consequences will be severe. Not just for you, but for everyone you care about. He turned and walked towards the fireplace, his back to her again. The villa is at your disposal. My men will be discreet, but they will be watching. Don't try to run, Signora Marchesi. It won't end well. Valeria stood there, frozen, the weight of his words pressing down on her. 1 week. To find something she didn't even know existed. To save herself, and perhaps, to save what was left of her family. The shadows in the library seemed to deepen, engulfing her in a darkness that was both familiar and terrifying. She looked at a portrait of her father above the fireplace, his painted eyes seeming to follow her, a silent accusation, a desperate plea. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed the hour, each toll a heavy reminder of the dwindling time, a countdown to an unknown fate. Chapter 3. The Unseen Debt. The silence in the library, after Niccolò Moretti's departure, was heavy, oppressive. Valeria felt suffocated, trapped in a web of her brother's making. She sank into one of the leather armchairs, her legs suddenly weak. 1 week. It seemed like an impossibly short time, a cruel joke played by fate. She ran a hand over the worn leather of the chair, remembering countless evenings spent in this room, listening to her father's hushed conversations, the clinking of glasses, the rustling of papers. She had always felt like an outsider, an observer, never truly a part of that world. Now, she was thrust into the center of it, forced to confront a past she had desperately tried to escape. What had Leo promised? What currency could possibly be worth more than money to a man like Niccolò Moretti? Information, he'd said. About alliances, about weaknesses. But what information? And where would she even begin to look? Her father had kept meticulous records, she knew. He had a secret vault, hidden behind a bookshelf in his private study. She had stumbled upon it once as a child, and he had sworn her to secrecy. She had never told anyone, not even Leo. Could that be it? Could the vault hold the answers she needed? The thought filled her with a mixture of dread and a flicker of hope. The vault was a dangerous place, a repository of her family's darkest secrets. But it was also her only lead, her only chance to unravel the mystery of Leo's disappearance and the nature of his debt. She rose from the chair, her legs still shaky, but her resolve hardening. She had to do this. She had to face the past, no matter how painful, no matter how dangerous. She had to protect what was left of her family, even if it meant confronting the man who held their fate in his hands. The villa was eerily quiet. The servants, ever present but unobtrusive, moved like shadows, their eyes avoiding hers. She felt their scrutiny, their unspoken questions. They knew, of course. They always knew. The Marchesi family secrets were like a living thing, breathing through the walls of the villa, infecting everything it touched. She made her way to her father's study, a smaller, more intimate room than the library, but no less imposing. The walls were lined with books, and a large, antique desk dominated the center of the room. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and her father's favorite pipe tobacco, a poignant reminder of his absence. She stood before the bookshelf, her heart pounding in her chest. She remembered the mechanism, a hidden lever concealed behind a specific volume, a first edition of Machiavelli's The Prince. A fitting hiding place, she thought grimly. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the book, her mind flashing back to that day, so many years ago, when she had discovered the vault. Her father had been furious, but then he had softened, seeing the fear in her eyes. He had made her swear never to tell anyone, never to go near it again. She pulled the book from the shelf, and a small click echoed in the silent room. She felt along the back of the shelf, her fingers searching for the lever. She found it a small, metal protrusion, almost invisible to the naked eye. She pressed it, and a section of the bookshelf swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow passage. The vault. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the opening. A wave of fear washed over her, a primal instinct to turn back, to run away, to escape the darkness that awaited her. But she couldn't. She had to go in. She took a deep breath and stepped into the passage. The door swung shut behind her, plunging her into complete darkness. She fumbled for a light switch, her fingers brushing against cold, damp stone. She found it, and a single, bare bulb flickered to life, illuminating a small, cramped room. The vault was filled with shelves, stacked high with boxes, files, and ledgers. It was a treasure trove of information, a record of her family's long and complicated history. A history of power, of violence, of betrayal. She began to search, her hands moving quickly, desperately. She opened boxes, rifled through files, scanned ledgers. Hours passed, and the dust and the silence of the vault began to close in on her. She found nothing. Nothing that seemed to relate to Leo's debt, nothing that would explain his disappearance. Just as despair began to creep in, her fingers brushed against a small, wooden box, tucked away on a high shelf. It was old, intricately carved and locked. A faint, almost imperceptible symbol was etched on the lid, a serpent entwined with a dagger. Chapter 4. A glimmer of defiance. The serpent entwined with a dagger. Valeria recognized the symbol immediately. It was not the Marquesi crest, the coiled serpent biting its own tail. This was something different, something older, something she had only seen once before, in a faded photograph tucked away in her father's private album. A photograph of a young woman, beautiful and defiant, with the same symbol tattooed on her wrist. Her father had never spoken about her, and Valeria had always sensed that it was a forbidden topic. Her heart pounded in her chest. Could this box be the key? Could it contain the answer to Leo's debt, the secret that Niccolò Moretti was so desperate to obtain? She carefully lifted the box from the shelf. It was heavier than she expected, the wood cold and smooth beneath her fingers. She tried to open it, but the lock held firm. She needed a key. She searched the vault, frantically, looking for anything that might resemble a key to the box. She found nothing. Frustration and despair began to creep in again, threatening to overwhelm her. She was so close, yet so far. She sank to the floor, the box clutched in her hands, her mind racing. Where would her father have kept the key? He was a meticulous man, a man who valued secrecy above all else. He wouldn't have left it lying around. Then she remembered. The ring. Her father had always worn a large, signet ring, bearing the Marquesi crest. But beneath the crest, hidden from view, was a small compartment, designed to hold a tiny key. She had seen him open it once, when she was a child, to retrieve a small, silver key that unlocked a hidden drawer in his desk. Could that be it? Could the key to the box be hidden in her father's ring? But the ring was gone. She remembered, with a pang of grief, that it had been buried with him. A wave of hopelessness washed over her. She was trapped. She had found the box, but she couldn't open it. She was so close to finding the answer, yet it remained tantalizingly out of reach. Suddenly, a sound from outside the vault startled her. A faint scraping, followed by a muffled voice. Niccolò Moretti. She quickly switched off the light, plunging the vault back into darkness. She held her breath, listening intently.
Signora Marchesi?
His voice was closer now, laced with a hint of impatience. Are you in there? She didn't answer. She couldn't. She had to think. She had to find a way out of this. She heard the bookshelf creak as he tried to open it. He couldn't find the lever. She had been careful to reset it, to make it look as if the bookshelf was undisturbed. Valeria, he said, his voice now sharp, edged with anger. I know you're in there. Come out.
Now.
She remained silent, her mind racing. She couldn't let him find her.
Not yet. She needed more time.
She needed to find a way to open the box. Then, she had an idea. A desperate, risky idea, but it was her only chance. She remembered the small, silver key her father had kept in his ring. It wasn't the key to the box, but it might be small enough to pick the lock. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. She knew where the key was. In the hidden drawer in her father's desk. The same drawer she had seen him open all those years ago. She had to get out of the vault, get to the desk, and retrieve the key. And she had to do it without Niccolò Moretti finding her. She waited, listening to his movements outside the vault. He was still trying to open the bookshelf, his frustration growing. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. It was now or never. She carefully, silently, pressed the lever, and the bookshelf swung inward. She slipped out of the vault, just as Niccolò turned, his eyes widening in surprise. She did not meet his golden gaze and instead sprinted towards her father's desk, a renewed sense of purpose flooding through every vein. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Dark. Valeria dashed towards the desk, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Niccolò's surprised shout echoed behind her, followed by the heavy thud of his footsteps. She knew she didn't have much time. The desk, a massive mahogany monolith, seemed miles away. She reached it, breathless, her fingers fumbling for the hidden catch. She remembered her father showing her, years ago, a small, almost invisible indentation on the underside of the drawer. She pressed it, and a click echoed in the tense silence. The drawer slid open, revealing a velvet-lined interior. And there it was. The small, silver key. She snatched it up, her fingers closing around it tightly, a surge of relief washing over her. But it was short-lived. Valeria. Niccolò's voice was close now, his hand reaching out to grab her. She spun around, narrowly avoiding his grasp. She had to get back to the vault, back to the box. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his golden eyes blazing with anger. "What is that key?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. She had to focus. She had to escape. She darted past him, heading back towards the bookshelf. He lunged for her, but she was too quick. She reached the bookshelf, her fingers already searching for the lever. "Don't do this, Valeria," he said, his voice now low, menacing. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." She ignored him. She found the lever, pressed it, and the bookshelf swung inward. She slipped into the vault, the door closing behind her with a resounding thud. She was safe for the moment.
But she was also trapped.
She had the key, but she was locked in the vault with no way out. She switched on the light, her hands trembling. She took the small, wooden box from the floor and placed it on a nearby shelf. She inserted the silver key into the lock, her heart in her throat. It fit. She turned the key, slowly, carefully. A click echoed in the small, cramped space. The lock was open. She lifted the lid of the box, her breath catching in her throat. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, leather-bound journal. It was old, the pages yellowed and brittle. The same symbol, the serpent entwined with a dagger, was embossed on the cover. She opened the journal, her fingers tracing the faded ink. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, but unfamiliar. It wasn't her father's. It was a woman's handwriting. She began to read. The first entry was dated over 50 years ago. It was written in Italian, a formal, almost poetic style. "My dearest Alessandro," it began. "I write this with a heavy heart, knowing that our time together is coming to an end. The feud between our families is too strong, the hatred too deep. We can never be together. Not in this life." Valeria's heart ached. It was a love letter, a farewell letter, from a woman she didn't know to her father. A woman who had been forced to give him up because of the ancient rivalry between their families. She continued to read, her eyes scanning the pages, searching for any clue, any hint of what Leo might have promised Niccolò Moretti. The journal spoke of a secret, a dangerous secret that could destroy both families. A secret that had been entrusted to the writer, a secret that she had vowed to protect with her life. I have hidden it, she wrote, in a place where no one will ever find it, unless the time comes when it must be revealed, when the only way to save our families is to expose the truth. Valeria's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the secret. But where was it hidden? She continued to read, frantically searching for the answer. The final entry was abrupt, unfinished. They are coming for me, it read. I have to go. I have to hide. The journal ended there. The rest of the pages were blank. Valeria closed the journal, her mind reeling. She had found the secret, or at least a part of it. But she still didn't know where it was hidden. Suddenly, a loud banging on the vault door startled her. Niccolo. He had found a way to open the bookshelf. Valeria, he shouted, his voice muffled by the thick stone walls. Open this door.
Now.
She was trapped. She had nowhere to go. She clutched the journal to her chest, her eyes darting around the small, cramped space. She was out of time. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, landing on the journal's cover, the serpent and dagger seeming to mock her desperate plight. Chapter 6. The Weight of Loyalty. The banging on the vault door grew more insistent, Niccolo's voice a furious roar that echoed through the confined space. Valeria felt a surge of panic, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She was trapped, cornered, with nowhere to run. She looked around the vault, her eyes desperately searching for an escape, a hiding place, anything. But there was nothing. Just shelves filled with boxes and files, the silent witnesses to her family's dark history. She clutched the journal to her chest, her fingers tracing the embossed symbol of the serpent and dagger. The woman's words echoed in her mind. I have hidden it, in a place where no one will ever find it, unless the time comes when it must be revealed. The time had come, but where was it? Suddenly, an idea struck her. The journal itself. The woman had written that she had hidden the secret. But what if the secret wasn't somewhere else? What if it was hidden within the journal itself? She quickly flipped through the pages again, her eyes scanning the faded ink, searching for anything that might be out of place, any clue, any hidden message. She noticed something she hadn't seen before. A faint discoloration on one of the pages, near the end of the journal. A small, almost imperceptible stain, as if something had been spilled on it. She held the page up to the light, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see something faint, something hidden beneath the stain. A series of numbers, barely visible. A code. She realized, with a jolt of understanding, that the stain wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. The woman had used some kind of invisible ink, a secret method of writing that would only be revealed under certain conditions. But how could she reveal it? What could she use to make the code visible? She remembered a trick her father had shown her, years ago, when he had taught her about secret codes and ciphers. He had used lemon juice to reveal invisible ink. Lemon juice. She looked around the vault, frantically searching for anything that might contain citric acid. She found nothing. The banging on the door continued, Niccolo's voice now hoarse with rage. He was about to break through. She had to think fast. She had to find something, anything that could reveal the code. Then she remembered. The wine cellar. The villa had a vast wine cellar, filled with bottles of vintage wines. And some of those wines, particularly the white wines, contained citric acid. She had to get to the wine cellar. But how? She looked at the vault door, her mind racing. She couldn't go back through the bookshelf. Niccolo was waiting for her. There had to be another way out. A secret passage, perhaps. Her father had always loved secrets, hidden passages, hidden rooms. She remembered something he had told her once, a story about a secret passage that led from the villa to the gardens. A passage that had been used by the Marchesi family for generations to escape from their enemies. Could it be true? Could there be a secret passage leading out of the vault? She began to search, her fingers running along the cold, damp stone walls, searching for any sign of a hidden door, a hidden lever. The banging on the door continued, louder now, more insistent. He was about to break through. She found it. A small, almost imperceptible crack in the wall, near the floor. She pressed on it, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow passage.
Un secret passage.
She slipped into the passage, the door closing behind her with a soft click. She was in complete darkness. She fumbled for the light switch in her pocket, which she'd pocketed from the study. The faint beam illuminated a narrow, dusty tunnel, stretching out before her into the unknown. She hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding. She started walking, the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something old and forgotten, filling the air. A heavy premonition. Chapter 7. Echoes of Betrayal. The secret passage was narrow and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. Valeria moved slowly, carefully, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, revealing cobwebs and the occasional scurrying rat. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the sound of her own breathing and the distant, muffled shouts of Niccolò Moretti. She had no idea where the passage led, how long it would take to reach the end. But she had to keep going. She had to get to the wine cellar, find a bottle of white wine, and reveal the code hidden in the journal. As she walked, her mind replayed the events of the past few days. Her brother's disappearance, Niccolò Moretti's arrival, the discovery of the vault and the journal. It was all a tangled web of secrets and lies, a legacy of betrayal that stretched back generations. The woman in the journal, her father's lost love. She had sacrificed everything for her family, for her love for Alessandro. And now, Valeria was caught in the middle of it, forced to confront the consequences of their choices. She wondered about Niccolò. He was a dangerous man, ruthless and driven. But she had also seen glimpses of something else in him, a vulnerability, a hint of sadness that belied his hard exterior. She couldn't deny the attraction she felt for him, a dangerous, forbidden attraction that made her heart race and her senses stir. But she couldn't trust him. He was her enemy, the man who held her family's fate in his hands. She had to remember that. She had to focus on her goal, on finding the secret, on saving her brother. After what seemed like an eternity, she saw a faint light ahead. The end of the passage. She reached the end and found herself in a small, stone chamber. A single, wooden door stood before her, leading, she hoped, to the wine cellar. She opened the door cautiously, her flashlight beams sweeping across the room. It was the wine cellar, a vast, cavernous space filled with rows upon rows of wine bottles, stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was cool and damp, the scent of wine heavy and intoxicating. She moved quickly, searching for a bottle of white wine. She found one, a Pinot Grigio, its label faded and dusty. She grabbed it, her hands trembling. She returned to the small chamber, closed the door, and switched off her flashlight. She needed to be careful. She didn't want to attract Niccolò's attention. She opened the journal to the page with the stain, her heart pounding in her chest. She poured a small amount of the wine onto the stain, her fingers spreading it gently across the page. She waited, holding her breath, watching as the wine slowly evaporated. And then she saw it. The code, slowly appearing on the page, the numbers becoming clearer, more distinct. It was a series of coordinates, latitude and longitude, a location, the secret. She quickly memorized the coordinates, her mind racing. She had to get out of here, find a way to use this information, to save her brother. Suddenly, she heard a noise from the passage. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Niccolò. She quickly closed the journal, hiding it under her dress. She grabbed the wine bottle, her mind racing. She had to be ready. The door to the chamber creaked open, and Niccolò Moretti stepped inside, his face dark with anger, his golden eyes blazing. "There you are," he said, his voice a low growl. "I knew you couldn't escape me." He moved towards her, his hand reaching out to grab her. She raised the wine bottle, ready to defend herself, to fight for her life, for the truth that she had to protect. The betrayal of her family was old, but new revelations made their sting sharp again. The dim light from the passage illuminated Niccolò's features, highlighting the sharp angles of his face and the intensity of his stare, the air thick with unspoken accusations and unresolved history. Chapter 8. A Fragile Truce. Valeria braced herself, gripping the wine bottle tightly, ready to strike. But Nicolo stopped, his hand hovering in the air, his eyes fixed on hers. He seemed to sense something in her expression, a defiance, a determination that surprised him. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice softer now, less threatening. Valeria hesitated. She couldn't trust him, but she also knew that she couldn't fight him. He was too strong, too powerful. She needed to find another way. "I found something," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear that coursed through her. "Something that might help my brother. But I need your help." He raised a dark eyebrow, his gaze skeptical. "My help? Why should I help you?" "Because," she said, meeting his gaze directly, "what I found concerns both our families. It's bigger than just Leo's debt. It's about a secret that has been hidden for generations, a secret that could destroy us all." He studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes searching hers, trying to gauge her sincerity. She could see the conflict in his expression, the wariness battling with a flicker of curiosity. "What kind of secret?" he asked, his voice low, guarded. Valeria took a deep breath. She had to trust him, at least partially. She had to show him that she wasn't his enemy, that they had a common goal. "It's about our fathers," she said. "About a woman they both loved. About a betrayal that happened a long time ago, a betrayal that has shaped our family's history ever since." She told him about the journal, about the woman's letter, about the code she had found. She didn't reveal the coordinates, not yet. But she told him enough to pique his interest, to make him realize that this was something important, something that could affect them both. He listened intently, his expression changing as she spoke. The anger, the hostility, seemed to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease, of curiosity. "And you think this secret, this location will help your brother?" he asked, when she had finished. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I think it's the key. It's the only lead I have." He was silent for a moment, his mind clearly racing. She could see the wheels turning, the calculations being made. He was a strategist, a man who always thought several steps ahead. "Show me the journal," he said finally. Valeria hesitated. She didn't want to give him the journal, not yet. It was her only leverage, her only bargaining chip. "I'll show you the code," she said. "But not the journal. Not until I know I can trust you." He frowned, his eyes narrowing. "You don't trust me? Should I?" she asked, her voice challenging. "You threatened me. You said you would hurt my family." He looked away, a flicker of shame crossing his face. "I was angry," he said. "Your brother, he put me in a difficult position. And that gives you the right to threaten me?" He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "No," he said. "It doesn't. I apologize." The apology surprised her. It was unexpected, genuine. She saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, a hint of the man beneath the ruthless facade. "I need your help, Nicolo," she said, her voice softer now. "I can't do this alone. I need your resources, your connections. And you need to know the truth, just as much as I do." He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers. She saw a flicker of something she hadn't seen before. Respect. Perhaps even trust. "All right, Valeria," he said, his voice low, resolute. "We'll do this together. A truce. For now." He held out his hand. She hesitated for a moment, then took it. His grip was strong, warm, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. It was a fragile truce, a dangerous alliance. But it was all they had. The weight of their shared history, the potential for destruction or salvation, hung heavy in the air, a silent pact sealed in the cool darkness of the wine cellar. Chapter 9. The Price of Freedom. The truce, forged in the dim confines of the wine cellar, was uneasy, fraught with unspoken tensions. Valeria and Nicolo, bound by a shared goal but separated by years of animosity, began their precarious partnership. They left the villa together, the sprawling estate receding into the darkness as they drove away in Nicolo's sleek, black car. The silence in the car was thick, punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the occasional sigh from Valeria. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. To a safe house, Nicolo replied, his eyes fixed on the road. Somewhere we can talk, plan, without being watched. Valeria nodded, her mind racing. She had the coordinates, the location of the secret. But she still didn't know what it was, what they would find there. And she still didn't fully trust Nicolo. They arrived at a small, unassuming apartment in a quiet residential neighborhood of Florence. It was sparsely furnished, but clean and comfortable. A stark contrast to the opulent grandeur of the Villa Marchesi. Nicolo locked the door behind them, his movements quick, efficient. He was a man used to taking precautions, to living in the shadows. We need to decipher the coordinates, he said, turning to Valeria. Find out where they lead. Valeria nodded. She took out a small notebook and pen from her bag, the ones she always carried for her art history notes, and wrote down the coordinates she had memorized. Nicolo watched her, his golden eyes intense, scrutinizing. He pulled out his phone, a sleek, high-tech device, and entered the coordinates into a mapping application. The location appeared on the screen. A small, remote island off the coast of Tuscany.
Isola del Silenzio.
The Island of Silence. Valeria felt a chill run down her spine. The name was ominous, foreboding. What secrets did that island hold? I've never heard of it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's privately owned, Nicolo replied. Belongs to an old family, the Castiglione. They're reclusive. They don't like visitors. The Castiglione. Valeria vaguely remembered hearing the name, whispered in hushed tones by her father, years ago. Another powerful family, another player in the intricate game of power and influence that ruled their world. What's their connection to our families? She asked. Nicolo hesitated.
There are rumors, he said.
Old stories. About an alliance, a pact, made long ago, between the Marchesi, the Moretti, and the Castiglione.
En alliance. A pact.
The words echoed in Valeria's mind. It was all starting to make sense. The journal, the secret, the coordinates. It was all connected, a tangled web of relationships and betrayals that stretched back generations. We need to go there, she said, her voice firm, resolute. We need to find out what's on that island. Nicolo nodded. I agree. But it won't be easy. The Castiglione are heavily guarded. They don't welcome strangers. We'll find a way, Valeria said, her determination hardening. We have to. Nicolo looked at her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. He saw her strength, her resilience, her unwavering commitment to her family. He saw a woman who was not afraid to fight, to risk everything for what she believed in. We'll need a boat, he said. And a plan. They spent the rest of the night planning their journey to Isola del Silenzio, poring over maps, discussing strategies, weighing risks. They were two people from opposing worlds, brought together by a shared past, a shared goal. A fragile alliance, forged in the crucible of danger and betrayal. But it was all they have, and was getting stronger with each passing hour. As dawn approached, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, a sense of shared purpose, however tentative, settled between them, the price of freedom for both their families hanging heavy in the balance. Chapter 10. Beneath the Surface. The journey to Isola del Silenzio was fraught with tension. Valeria and Nicolo, aboard a small, chartered fishing boat, navigated the choppy waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea, the island looming larger with each passing nautical mile. The salty air whipped around them, the cries of gulls overhead the only sound breaking the silence. Valeria watched Nicolo as he expertly handled the boat, his movements precise, confident. He was a man of the sea, as comfortable on the water as he was in the shadowy world of the Mafia. She wondered about his past, about the experiences that had shaped him, made him the man he was. She had seen glimpses of vulnerability beneath his hard exterior, moments of sadness, of regret. But she also knew that he was capable of ruthlessness, of violence. He was a complex man, a paradox, a mixture of darkness and light. Tell me about your family, Nicolo, she said, breaking the silence. He glanced at her, his golden eyes guarded. What do you want to know? Everything, she said. I want to understand you. I want to know why our families have been enemies for so long. He sighed, his gaze returning to the horizon. It's a long story, he said. A story of blood and betrayal, of power and greed. It started generations ago, with a dispute over territory, over control of the city. He told her about the early days of the feud, the battles fought, the lives lost. He spoke of his father, a hard, unforgiving man who had ruled the Moretti family with an iron fist. He spoke of his own upbringing, the pressure to live up to his father's expectations, to follow in his footsteps. I never wanted this life, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I wanted something different, something more. Valeria saw the pain in his eyes, the yearning for something he could never have. She understood him, in a way she hadn't expected. She, too, had yearned for a different life, a life free from the shadows of her family's past. What did you want? She asked softly. He looked at her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. It doesn't matter now, he said. It's too late. They reached the island as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rocky coastline.
Isola del Silenzio.
It lived up to its name. It was eerily quiet, the only sound the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. They found a secluded cove, hidden from view, and anchored the boat. The island was heavily wooded, the trees thick and ancient, their branches intertwined, creating a canopy of darkness. We need to be careful, Niccolò said, his voice low, cautious. The Castiglione are known for their security. They have guards, patrols. We don't want to be seen. They set off into the woods, moving slowly, silently, their senses on high alert. Valeria felt a growing sense of unease, a prickling of her skin that told her they were not alone. They reached a clearing, and Valeria gasped. Before them stood a massive, ancient villa, its stone walls overgrown with ivy, its windows dark and empty. It looked deserted, abandoned, a relic of a bygone era. But Valeria knew better. She could feel the presence of others, the watchful eyes, the hidden dangers. This was not an abandoned villa. It was a fortress. As they approached the villa, two figures emerged from the shadows, their faces hidden by the darkness.
Guards.
Armed and dangerous. The confrontation was inevitable, but Valeria's curiosity of the past was stronger than her fear. The air crackled with anticipation, the secrets of the island, and the families intertwined with it, seemingly pressing in on them, waiting to be unveiled. Chapter 11. Unspoken Desires. The guards stepped into the fading light, their faces now visible. They were young, hardened, their eyes cold and unwelcoming. They held their weapons, shotguns, leveled at Valeria and Niccolò, their fingers on the triggers. State your business, one of the guards said, his voice harsh, grating. Niccolò stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. We're here to see Signor Castiglione, he said, his voice calm, authoritative. It's a matter of family importance. The guards exchanged a look, their expression skeptical. Signor Castiglione is not expecting visitors, the other guard said. Turn back.
Now.
We have information, Niccolò continued, his voice unwavering. Information that concerns him and our families. The Marchesi and the Moretti. The mention of the family names seemed to have an effect. The guards hesitated, their grip on their weapons loosening slightly. Wait here, one of them said, finally. He disappeared into the shadows of the villa, leaving the other guard to watch them. The silence was tense, heavy with unspoken threats. Valeria stood close to Niccolò, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel his strength, his presence, a source of comfort in this dangerous situation. She glanced at him, her eyes meeting his. She saw a flicker of something in his golden eyes, a warmth, a concern, that surprised her. It was a look that went beyond their fragile truce, beyond their shared goal. It was a look of desire. She felt a blush creep up her cheeks, a warmth spread through her body. She had been so focused on the mission, on the danger, that she had forgotten about the other feelings, the attraction that had been simmering between them. He looked away, his jaw tightening. He, too, felt it, the unspoken desires, the forbidden attraction. But they couldn't afford to be distracted. They were in a dangerous situation, surrounded by enemies. They had to focus. The guard returned, his expression still wary, but less hostile. "Signor Castiglione will see you," he said. "But only for a few minutes. And you will be searched." They were led into the villa, their bodies searched for weapons, their every move watched by the guards. The interior of the villa was dark and opulent, filled with antique furniture, tapestries, and paintings. It was a museum of a bygone era, a testament to the Castiglione family's long and powerful history. They were led into a large, dimly lit study, where an old man sat behind a massive desk. Signor Castiglione. He was frail, his skin pale and translucent, his eyes sunken and weary. But there was still a spark of power in his gaze, a hint of the formidable man he once must have been. "Moretti. Marchesi," he said, his voice raspy, weak. "What brings you to my island?" Nico Lowe stepped forward, his voice respectful, but firm. "We have information, Signor Castiglione," he said. "Information about a secret, a pact, made between our families generations ago." The old man's eyes narrowed, his gaze sharpening. "I know of no such pact," he said. "We found a journal," Valeria said, stepping forward. "Written by a woman named Serafina. She was in love with my father. She wrote about a secret, a dangerous secret that could destroy our families." Castiglione's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition, of fear, crossing his face. "Serafina," he whispered. "I remember her." He suddenly looked older than before, the reality of the past catching up to him. He looked from Niccolò to Valeria, and the unspoken desires between them did not escape his attention, a spark of forbidden connection in the midst of a centuries-old family drama. Chapter 12. Cracks in the Facade. Castiglione's reaction to Serafina's name was a crack in the facade, a chink in the armor of his carefully constructed denial. Valeria knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that he knew more than he was letting on. "She wrote about a secret," Valeria pressed, her voice gentle but firm. "A secret she hid. We believe it's on this island." The old man looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. He was clearly struggling with something, a conflict between his loyalty to the past and the need to protect the present. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice weaker now, less convincing. Nico Lowe stepped forward, his gaze intense, unwavering. "Signor Castiglione," he said, his voice low, resonant. "We know about the alliance. Between your family, the Marchesi, and the Moretti. We know about the agreement that was made." Castiglione looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. He knew that they knew. He knew that he couldn't deny it any longer. "It was a long time ago," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A different time. A different world. But the consequences are still with us," Valeria said. "My brother disappeared because of this secret. He was trying to exploit it. He made a mistake. He was a fool," Castiglione said, his voice harsh, dismissive. "He should have stayed out of it." "He's my brother," Valeria said, her voice rising, her anger flaring. "And I will do anything to find him, to save him." Nico Lowe placed a hand on her arm, a calming gesture. "We're not here to judge him, Signor Castiglione," he said. "We're here to find the truth, to understand what happened, and to prevent further bloodshed." Castiglione sighed, his shoulders slumping. He looked old, tired, defeated. The weight of the past, the burden of the secret, was clearly too much for him to bear. "Very well," he said, his voice resigned. "I will tell you what I know, but I warn you the truth is not pretty. It's a story of betrayal, of greed, of murder." He told them about the alliance, the pact that had been made between the three families generations ago. It was an agreement to share power, to control the city, to protect their interests. But it was also an agreement built on lies, on deceit, on violence. He told them about Serafina, the woman who had been loved by both Alessandro Marchesi and Riccardo Moretti, Niccolo's father. She had been a pawn in their game, a prize to be won, a tool to be used. "She discovered something," Castiglione said, his voice trembling. "Something that could have destroyed us all." A secret about a treasure. A vast treasure that had been hidden on this island for centuries. A treasure. Valeria's heart skipped a beat. So that was it. That was the secret. That was what Leo had been looking for. Where is it? Niccolo asked, his voice intense, focused. Castiglione hesitated. I don't know, he said. Serafina hid it. She never told anyone where it was. She took the secret to her grave. Valeria felt a surge of frustration, of disappointment. They were so close yet so far. But there must be a clue, she said. Something in the journal, something that Serafina left behind. The coordinates, Niccolo said, his eyes meeting Valeria's. They must lead to the treasure. Castiglione looked at them, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Perhaps, he said. Perhaps you can find it. Perhaps you can break the cycle of violence, of betrayal, that has plagued our families for so long. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant, lost in the past. The cracks in his facade had widened, revealing the truth, the pain, the regret. The weight of his words settled upon Valeria and Niccolo, the treasure a symbol of both their family's darkest secrets and a potential path to redemption. Chapter 13. The Gathering Storm. Castiglione's revelation hung in the air, heavy and ominous. The treasure. The source of so much conflict, so much bloodshed. Valeria felt a growing sense of unease, a premonition of danger. We need to leave, she said to Niccolo, her voice urgent. We need to get off this island. Niccolo nodded, his eyes scanning the room, his senses on high alert. He, too, felt the danger, the gathering storm. We'll go at first light, he said. We'll take the boat and head back to the mainland. But as they prepared to leave the study, the door burst open and a group of armed men stormed into the room. They were not Castiglione's guards. They were strangers, their faces hard, their eyes ruthless. Niccolo Moretti, one of them said, his voice cold, menacing. We've been looking for you. Valeria recognized him. Marco Rossi, one of Niccolo's rivals, a man who had been vying for control of the Moretti territory for years. Niccolo stood his ground, his body tense, his eyes narrowed. Rossi, he said, his voice a low growl. What are you doing here? I came for the treasure, Moretti, Rossi said, a smirk playing on his lips. The same treasure you're after. The treasure that will make me the most powerful man in Florence. You know nothing about the treasure, Niccolo said, his voice laced with contempt. I know enough, Rossi said. I know about the journal. I know about the coordinates. And I know that you have them. He gestured to his men, and they moved forward, surrounding Valeria and Niccolo. Give me the coordinates, Moretti, Rossi said. And I might let you live. Valeria felt a surge of fear, but also a surge of anger. She wouldn't let this happen. She wouldn't let Rossi win. We don't have them, she said, her voice defiant. We don't know what you're talking about. Rossi laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. Don't play games with me, Signora Marchesi, he said. I know you have them. You and Moretti. You're working together. He turned to Niccolo. You betrayed your own kind, Moretti, he said. You sided with the Marchesi. You're a disgrace to your family. Niccolo didn't flinch. My family is my own business, Rossi, he said. And you have no right to be here. I have every right, Rossi said. This island, this treasure, it belongs to me now. He signaled to his men, and they raised their weapons, ready to fire. Valeria closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. Suddenly, a voice rang out, loud and clear. Stop. It was Castiglione. He had risen from his chair, his frail body trembling, but his eyes blazing with fury. This is my island, he said, his voice surprisingly strong. And you will not spill blood in my home. Rossi turned to him, his expression disdainful. You're an old man, Castiglione, he said. You have no power here. I may be old, Castiglione said, but I still have some influence. And I will not allow you to desecrate this island, to steal what is not yours. He turned to his own guards, who had been standing by, watching the scene unfold. Arrest these men, he ordered, and take them away. The guards hesitated, unsure of what to do. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But Castiglione's authority, his presence, was still powerful. They moved forward, slowly, cautiously, their weapons drawn. Rossi's men hesitated, unsure of whether to fight or surrender. The tension in the room was palpable, a storm about to break. Valeria held her breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. The old alliances were crumbling, and new, uncertain ones were forming, the future hanging precariously in the balance. The clash between the old and the new, between loyalty and betrayal, was about to reach its climax, the island itself a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Chapter 14. A Desperate Plea. The standoff in Castiglione's study was a powder keg, ready to explode. Valeria watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as the two groups of armed men faced each other, their fingers hovering over the triggers of their weapons. Nico Lowe stood beside her, his body tense, his eyes fixed on Rossi. He was a predator, ready to strike, to defend himself and Valeria. But he was also outnumbered, outgunned. "Don't be a fool, Rossi," Nico Lowe said, his voice low, menacing. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Walk away now, and I'll forget this ever happened." Rossi laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "You're in no position to make threats, Moretti," he said. "You're finished. Your family is finished. And you're going to die here, on this island." He gestured to his men, and they took a step forward, their weapons raised. Valeria closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. Suddenly, Castiglione spoke, his voice surprisingly strong, authoritative. "Enough," he shouted. "I will not allow this. This is my home, and you will obey my orders." He turned to his guards. "Arrest these men," he repeated, "and take them away." The guards hesitated for a moment, then, with a visible surge of resolve, they moved forward, surrounding Rossi and his men. Rossi's men looked at him, their expressions uncertain. They were outnumbered, and they knew that Castiglione, despite his age, still held considerable power on the island. "Don't be stupid," Rossi snarled at his men.
Fight. Kill them all.
But his men didn't move. They looked at each other, then at Rossi, their faces filled with doubt, with fear. "I said, fight," Rossi screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. Still, his men didn't move. They had lost their nerve, their loyalty to Rossi crumbling in the face of Castiglione's authority and Nico Lowe's unwavering presence. Rossi was defeated. He knew it. He looked around the room, his eyes filled with rage, with hatred. "You may have won this battle, Moretti," he said, his voice trembling. "But you haven't won the war. I'll be back. And I'll destroy you. I'll destroy everything you care about." He spat on the floor, then turned and walked away, his men following him, their heads hung in shame. Castiglione's guards escorted them out of the villa, their weapons still drawn. The tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a sense of relief, of exhaustion. Valeria let out a shaky breath, her body trembling with reaction. She looked at Nico Lowe, her eyes filled with gratitude, with admiration. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You saved us." He shook his head. "It was Castiglione," he said. "He's the one who saved us." They turned to the old man, who was sitting back in his chair, his face pale and drawn. He looked exhausted, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "I did what I had to do," he said, his voice weak. "To protect my home. To protect the secret." He looked at Valeria, his gaze softening. "You remind me of her, he said. "Of Serafina. You have her spirit, her courage." Valeria felt a lump form in her throat. She had never known Serafina, but she felt a connection to her, a kinship. They were both women who had been caught in the crossfire of a family feud, women who had fought for what they believed in. "Signor Castiglione," Valeria said, her voice trembling.
"Please, tell us where the treasure is.
"Tell us how to find it. We need to end this. We need to break the cycle of violence." Castiglione looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. He knew that she was right. It was time to end the secret, to reveal the truth. He reached into a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small, antique map. It was a map of the island, faded and worn, with markings in a language Valeria didn't recognize. A desperate plea formed on his pale, dry lips. This will show you the way," he whispered, his voice barely audible, handing the fragile parchment to Valeria. Chapter 15. Revelations and Regrets. The map was ancient, the parchment brittle and fragile in Valeria's hands. The ink was faded, the markings cryptic, a mixture of symbols and a language she didn't recognize. But she could make out the general contours of the island, the location of the villa, and a series of markings that seemed to indicate a path, a trail, leading to a specific point on the island. "What is this language?" she asked, turning to Castiglione. The old man was slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow, his eyes closed. He looked like he was on the verge of collapse. Nico Lowe knelt beside him, checking his pulse.
"He's weak," he said. "He needs rest."
They helped Castiglione to a nearby sofa, making him comfortable. He opened his eyes, his gaze focusing on Valeria. "The language," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's ancient Etruscan. The original inhabitants of this island. Etruscan." Valeria remembered reading about them, the mysterious civilization that had predated the Romans in Italy. They were known for their art, their culture, and their secrets. "Can you translate it?" she asked. Castiglione shook his head weakly. I don't know," he said. "I only know the general location. The map, it leads to a cave. A hidden cave on the north side of the island." A cave. The treasure was hidden in a cave. It made sense. A natural hiding place, protected from the elements, from prying eyes. "We need to go there," Valeria said, turning to Nico Lowe. "We need to find that cave." Nico Lowe nodded. "But we need to be careful," he said. "Rossi may be gone, but he's not the only one who knows about the treasure. There could be others, waiting for us." They decided to wait until morning, to give Castiglione time to rest and to avoid any potential ambushes in the darkness. They spent the night in the villa, sleeping fitfully, their minds filled with anticipation, with dread. As dawn broke, they set off, following the map, making their way through the thick woods, towards the north side of the island. The air was cool and damp, the silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the occasional cry of a seabird. They reached the coast, a rugged, rocky shoreline, battered by the waves. The map indicated that the cave was hidden somewhere along this stretch of coastline, concealed by the cliffs, by the rocks. They searched for hours, their eyes scanning the cliffs, the crevices, the hidden nooks and crannies. They found nothing. Valeria felt a surge of frustration, of despair. They were so close, yet so far. "It has to be here," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "It has to be." Nico Lowe placed a hand on her arm, his touch calming, reassuring.
"We'll find it," he said.
"We just need to keep looking." And then he saw it. A small, almost imperceptible opening in the cliff face, hidden behind a curtain of ivy. It was so well concealed that they had almost missed it. "There," he said, pointing. "That's it." They carefully made their way to the opening, pulling aside the ivy, revealing a dark, narrow passage leading into the cliff. The cave. They entered cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air was cool and damp, the silence heavy, expectant. They followed the passage, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The passage opened into a larger chamber, and Valeria gasped. Before them, bathed in the soft glow of their flashlights, was the treasure. Not gold, not jewels, not what they had expected, but something far more valuable. Books. Shelves upon shelves of ancient books, scrolls, manuscripts. A library. A lost library of Etruscan knowledge, of history, of secrets. And among all other documents, a detailed account of the families Marchesi, Moretti, and Castiglione, and their intertwined bloodlines, betrayals. All the missing answers, the source of all questions. Valeria's eyes filled with tears. This was it. This was the secret. Not a treasure of material wealth, but a treasure of knowledge, of truth. Serafina's final resting place for secrets. They began to examine the books, carefully, reverently. They found texts on history, on philosophy, on science, on art. They found maps, charts, diagrams. They found the answers to questions they hadn't even known to ask. The revelations of their shared, intertwined past lay bare, offering a chance to rewrite their future, to finally break free from the cycle of violence and regret. Chapter 16. The Point of No Return. The discovery of the Etruscan library was a revelation, a turning point. Valeria and Niccolò spent hours poring over the ancient texts, uncovering secrets that had been hidden for centuries. They learned about the true history of their families, the origins of the feud, the betrayals, the alliances, the lies that had been passed down from generation to generation. They found Serafina's story, woven through the pages of the ancient texts. She had been a scholar, a historian, a guardian of knowledge. She had discovered the library, and she had vowed to protect it, to keep its secrets safe. They also found Leo's name, mentioned in a recent entry in one of the journals. He had been there, to the island. He had discovered the library. But he had also made a fatal mistake. He had tried to steal some of the texts to sell them to the highest bidder. He was playing with fire, Niccolò said, his voice grim. He didn't understand the power of this knowledge, the danger of revealing these secrets. Valeria felt a pang of grief for her brother, for his recklessness, his foolishness. But she also felt a sense of anger, of betrayal. He had put them all at risk for his own selfish gain. They found a hidden passage, a secret tunnel that led from the library to a small, secluded cove on the other side of the island. It was an escape route, a way to get off the island undetected. This is how Leo got away, Niccolò said. He must have used this passage to escape from Castiglione's guards. But where was he now? Was he still alive? Was he hiding somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike? They decided to leave the library, to return to the mainland and continue their search for Leo. They knew that they couldn't stay on the island any longer. It was too dangerous. As they prepared to leave, Niccolò turned to Valeria, his golden eyes searching hers. He had something to say, something he had been holding back. Valeria, he said, his voice low, hesitant. I need to tell you something. She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what was coming. She had seen it in his eyes, felt it in his touch. The unspoken desires, the forbidden attraction, had grown stronger, more intense. I know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I feel it too. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the curve of her face. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing, savoring the moment. This is wrong, he said, his voice filled with regret. We're from different worlds. Our families, they're enemies. I don't care, she said, her voice trembling. I don't care about the past. I don't care about the feud. I only care about you. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tight. He kissed her, a long, passionate kiss that erased all doubts, all fears, all reservations. It was a kiss that sealed their fate, a kiss that marked the point of no return. They had crossed a line, broken a taboo. They had chosen love over loyalty, passion over duty. They knew that it wouldn't be easy. Their families would never accept it. Their world would try to tear them apart. But they were ready to fight. They were ready to face whatever came their way. They left the library, hand in hand, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They were embarking on a new journey, a dangerous journey, a journey that could lead to either destruction or salvation. The weight of their family's past was still upon them, but now they carried it together, their love a fragile shield against the gathering storm. Chapter 17. A Dance with Danger. Leaving the island was a tense, silent affair. Valeria and Niccolò, using the secret passage, emerged onto the secluded cove, the small fishing boat bobbing gently in the water. They boarded quickly, Niccolò starting the engine, the sound echoing in the stillness of the early morning. As they navigated away from Isola del Silenzio, Valeria looked back, the imposing villa silhouetted against the rising sun. She felt a sense of relief, of escape, but also a sense of sadness, of leaving a part of her history behind. The journey back to the mainland was uneventful, but the silence between them was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions. The kiss, the passionate embrace in the library, had changed everything. It had shattered the fragile truce, transformed their alliance into something far more dangerous, far more profound. They reached the mainland, docking the boat in a small, deserted harbor. They had a plan. They would go to Nicolo's safe house, regroup, and decide what to do next. But as they stepped onto the shore, they were met by a group of armed men. Rossi's men. Well, a familiar voice sneered. Look who we have here. The happy couple. Rossi emerged from the shadows, a smirk playing on his lips. He was holding a gun, pointed directly at Nicolo. I told you I'd be back, Moretti, Rossi said. And I told you I'd destroy you. Valeria felt a surge of fear, but also a surge of anger. She wouldn't let this happen. She wouldn't let Rossi win. Let us go, Rossi, she said, her voice defiant. This doesn't concern you. Rossi laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. It concerns me very much, Signor Marchesi, he said. You see, I know about the library. I know about the treasure. And I know that you have the information I need. We have nothing, Nicolo said, his voice cold, hard. We found nothing on the island.
Don't lie to me, Moretti, Rossi said.
I know you found something. And I'm going to get it from you, one way or another. He gestured to his men, and they moved forward, surrounding Valeria and Nicolo. Take them, Rossi ordered. And, if they resist, kill them. Valeria and Nicolo were outnumbered, outgunned. They had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. But they wouldn't go down without a fight. Nicolo lunged at Rossi, knocking the gun from his hand. A fight erupted, a brutal, chaotic melee. Valeria fought alongside Nicolo, using her wits, her agility, to evade the attacks of Rossi's men. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation, of love, of a shared determination to survive. But they were slowly being overwhelmed. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Valeria screamed. Nicolo stumbled, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. He had been shot. Valeria rushed to his side, her eyes filled with terror. Nicolo,
she cried.
Are you all right? He grimaced in pain, but he nodded. I'm okay, he said. It's just a scratch. But it wasn't just a scratch. It was a serious wound. He was losing blood, fast. Rossi stood over them, a triumphant grin on his face. It's over, Moretti, he said. You're finished. He raised his gun, ready to deliver the final blow. Valeria closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. But the shot never came. Instead, she heard a different sound. The sound of sirens. Police sirens. Rossi's men panicked, scattering in all directions. Rossi himself looked around, his eyes wide with fear, with disbelief. He had been betrayed. Someone had tipped off the police. The police arrived, swarming the harbor, arresting Rossi and his men. Valeria and Nicolo were safe for now. But Nicolo needed medical attention. He was rushed to a hospital, his condition critical. Valeria waited outside the operating room, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing. She had almost lost him. She had almost lost everything. She paced frantically, the sterile smell of the hospital a stark contrast to the wild, untamed scent of the island, the dance with danger far from over. Chapter 18. The Heart's Reckoning. The hours in the hospital waiting room were a blur of anxiety and fear. Valeria paced restlessly, her mind replaying the events of the past few days, the violence, the betrayal, the near-death experience. She had almost lost Nicolo. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She had called her aunt, Isabella, Leo's closest relative besides herself, and updated her on the search. She had left out, of course, the parts that might land both of them in jail, or worse. Finally, a doctor emerged from the operating room, his face weary, but his expression cautiously optimistic.
He's stable, the doctor said.
The bullet grazed his arm, but it caused significant damage. He lost a lot of blood, but he's strong. He'll pull through. Valeria felt a surge of relief, so intense that her legs almost gave way. She sank into a chair, her body trembling with reaction. "Can I see him?"
she asked.
The doctor nodded. "He's still unconscious," he said. "But you can sit with him for a few minutes." Valeria followed the doctor to Nicolo's room, her heart pounding in her chest. He was lying in bed, his arm bandaged, his face pale and drawn. He looked vulnerable, fragile, a stark contrast to the strong, powerful man she knew. She sat beside him, gently taking his hand. His skin was warm, his pulse steady. She felt a surge of love for him, so profound, so overwhelming, that it brought tears to her eyes. She had fallen in love with her enemy, with a man from a world she had always despised. But she had also found a connection with him, a bond that transcended their family's feud, their different backgrounds. She stayed with him for hours, watching him sleep, whispering words of comfort, of love. She told him about her fears, her hopes, her dreams. She told him about the library, about the secrets they had uncovered. As dawn approached, Nicolo stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at Valeria, his gaze confused, disoriented. "Valeria," he whispered, his voice weak. What happened?" She smiled, her eyes filling with tears of relief.
"You were shot," she said.
"But you're going to be okay. You're safe now." He tried to sit up, but he winced in pain.
"Rossi," he said. "Did they?"
"The police arrested him," Valeria said.
"He's gone."
"He won't hurt us anymore." He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers. He remembered the kiss, the embrace, the unspoken promise they had made. "Valeria," he said, his voice stronger now. I love you." She leaned down and kissed him, a gentle, tender kiss that spoke of love, of hope, of a future they would build together. "I love you too, Nicolo," she said. Their hearts had reckoned with the past, with the present, with the uncertain future. They had chosen love, a love born in the midst of danger, of betrayal, of a centuries-old feud. They knew that it wouldn't be easy. Their families would never accept it. Their world would try to tear them apart. But they were ready to fight. They were ready to face whatever came their way, together. The sterile white walls of the hospital room seemed to fade away, replaced by a vision of a future, fragile, yet filled with a fierce, unwavering love. Chapter 19. Scars of the Soul. Nicolo's recovery was slow but steady. He spent several weeks in the hospital, undergoing physical therapy, regaining his strength. Valeria was by his side every day, her presence a constant source of comfort, of support. They talked about their future, about the challenges they would face, about the possibility of building a life together, a life free from the shadows of their family's past. "We need to find Leo," Valeria said one day, as they sat together in Nicolo's hospital room. "We need to know what happened to him." Nicolo nodded. "I agree," he said. "But we need to be careful. We don't know who we can trust." They had learned from the Etruscan library that Leo had been involved in a dangerous game, trying to sell some of the ancient texts to various interested parties, including Rossi. He had made enemies, powerful enemies. They decided to use the information they had gathered from the library to track down Leo, to find out who he had been working with, who might have wanted him silenced. As Nicolo regained his strength, they began their investigation, carefully, discreetly. They contacted old acquaintances, informants, people who had their fingers on the pulse of the underworld. They discovered that Leo had been working with a group of international art thieves, a shadowy organization that specialized in stealing and selling ancient artifacts. He had promised them some of the Etruscan texts in exchange for a large sum of money. But the deal had gone sour. Leo had apparently double-crossed the art thieves, trying to keep the texts for himself. He had made a powerful enemy, an enemy who had the resources and the ruthlessness to make him disappear. Valeria felt a pang of guilt, of responsibility. She had always tried to protect Leo, to shield him from the darker aspects of their family's world. But she had failed. She had underestimated his recklessness, his greed. "It's not your fault, Valeria," Nicolo said, sensing her distress. "Leo made his own choices. He knew the risks." They finally got a lead. A contact in Rome had information about Leo's whereabouts. He was hiding out in a small village in the south of Italy, living under an assumed name. They traveled to the village, a remote, picturesque place nestled in the hills. They found Leo, living in a small, unassuming house, his appearance changed, his spirit broken. He was surprised to see them, relieved, but also ashamed. He had made a mess of things, he admitted. He had put their lives in danger. "I'm sorry, Valeria," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Valeria embraced him, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and anger. She was glad to see him alive, but she was also furious with him for his recklessness, his selfishness. "It's okay, Leo," she said. "It's over now. We're here to help you." Niccolò, despite his past grievances with Leo, extended a hand, a gesture of forgiveness, of reconciliation. "We need to get you to safety," Niccolò said. "And then we need to decide what to do with the library." The scars of their souls, the wounds inflicted by their family's past, were still there, but they were beginning to heal. They had found each other, and they had found a purpose, a reason to fight for a better future. The quiet village, with its ancient stones and hidden secrets, became a symbol of their own journey, a place of healing, of reckoning, of a new beginning. Chapter 20. The final confrontation of hearts and loyalties. The decision of what to do with the Etruscan library weighed heavily on Valeria and Niccolò. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, of history, but it was also a source of danger, a magnet for those who would exploit its secrets for their own gain. They discussed various options, donating it to a museum, turning it over to the authorities, keeping it hidden, protecting it themselves. Each option had its pros and cons, its risks and rewards. "We can't let it fall into the wrong hands," Valeria said, as they sat together in Leo's small house, discussing their options. "It's too important, too dangerous." Niccolò nodded. "I agree," he said. "But we also can't keep it a secret forever. It deserves to be shared, studied, appreciated." Leo, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "I have an idea," he said. "A way to protect the library, and to use it for good." He proposed creating a foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to preserving and studying the Etruscan texts. They would invite scholars, historians, archaeologists from around the world to access the library, under strict supervision, ensuring that its secrets were used for knowledge, not for profit. It was a bold idea, a risky idea, but it was also the right idea. It was a way to honor Serafina's legacy, to break the cycle of violence and betrayal that had plagued their families for so long. Valeria and Niccolò agreed. They would create the foundation, together. They would use their combined resources, their influence, to make it a reality. But first, they had to deal with the final confrontation, the reckoning with their families. They knew that their relationship, their alliance, would never be accepted by the Marchesi and the Moretti. They decided to call a meeting, a gathering of the two families, at the Villa Marchesi. It was a symbolic gesture, a way to confront the past, to challenge the old order. The meeting was tense, fraught with animosity. The elders of both families were outraged by Valeria and Niccolò's relationship, by their betrayal of tradition, of loyalty. "You have disgraced our family, Valeria," her Aunt Isabella said, her voice filled with anger and disappointment. "You are a traitor, Moretti," one of Niccolò's uncles said, his voice laced with contempt. But Valeria and Niccolò stood their ground, their love a shield against the hatred, the prejudice. "We are not traitors," Valeria said, her voice firm, resolute. "We are trying to build a new future, a future free from the violence, the hatred that has defined our families for too long." Niccolò stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We have found something extraordinary," he said. "Something that belongs to all of us. The Etruscan library. A treasure trove of knowledge, of history." He told them about the foundation, about their plan to share the library with the world, to use it for good. There was silence, a stunned silence. The elders of both families were speechless, their minds struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they were hearing. Then slowly, gradually, a change began to occur. Some of the younger members of the families, those who had grown tired of the endless feud, of the constant violence, began to speak up to support Valeria and Nicolo. "It's time for a change," one of Valeria's cousins said. "We can't keep living in the past." "This is an opportunity," one of Nicolo's younger brothers said. "An opportunity to build something new, something better." The tide began to turn. The old order began to crumble, replaced by a new hope, a new vision of the future. The meeting ended, not with a resolution, but with a beginning of a new era, an era of peace, of cooperation, of love. Valeria and Nicolo had faced the final confrontation, the reckoning with their hearts and loyalties. They had chosen love, and they had won. The confrontation had revealed the deep divisions within their families, but it had also paved the way for a future where reconciliation, however fragile, was possible. The Villa Marchesi, once a symbol of division and conflict, stood on the precipice of becoming a beacon of hope, a testament to the transformative power of love and forgiveness. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Villa Marchesi was no longer a silent, brooding sentinel of a dark past. It was alive, vibrant, filled with the laughter of children, the murmur of conversation, the scent of flowers and freshly baked bread. Valeria and Nicolo stood on the terrace, overlooking the sprawling gardens, their hands intertwined. Their love had endured, grown stronger, weathered the storms of family disapproval and the challenges of building a new life together. The Serafina Foundation, named in honor of the woman whose secret had brought them together, was a thriving institution, a center of learning, of research, of cultural exchange. Scholars from around the world came to study the Etruscan texts, to unravel the mysteries of the past, to build a bridge between cultures. Leo, redeemed and reformed, was the director of the foundation, his energy and passion channeled into a positive, constructive purpose. He had found his calling, his redemption. The Marchesi and Moretti families were still divided, still wary of each other. But the old hatred, the bitter feud, had faded, replaced by a grudging respect, a cautious acceptance. Valeria and Nicolo had built a bridge between the two families, a bridge of love, of forgiveness, of shared purpose. They had shown them that it was possible to break the cycle of violence, to escape the shadows of the past. Their daughter, Sophia, a beautiful, spirited child with her father's golden eyes and her mother's dark hair, ran towards them, her laughter echoing through the gardens. She was the symbol of their love, the embodiment of their hope for the future. Nicolo scooped her up in his arms, holding her close. Valeria joined them, wrapping her arms around them both. They were a family forged in the crucible of danger, of betrayal, of a love that had defied all odds. As the sun set over Florence, casting a golden glow over the villa, Valeria looked at Nicolo, her eyes filled with love, with gratitude. She had found her home, her happiness, in the most unexpected of places, in the arms of a man who had once been her enemy. They had faced the darkness, and they had emerged stronger, more resilient, more in love than ever before. They had rewritten their family's history, transformed their legacy, from one of violence and hatred to one of hope and reconciliation. The scars of the past remained, etched on their souls, a reminder of the battles they had fought, the sacrifices they had made. But the scars were also a testament to their strength, their courage, their unwavering love. The villa, bathed in the warm, golden light of the setting sun, stood as a testament to their journey, a symbol of their enduring love, a beacon of hope for a future where anything was possible. Their story was a testament of love, family, and starting anew. They looked forward together, the past a lesson, the present a gift, and the future a canvas waiting to be painted with the vibrant colors of their shared dreams.